There's so much comfort in a relationship, I mean, just having
Hmm.
this steady person who looks out for you and you love and you want them around all the time. It's a beautiful thing, like, and I love being in that space. But at the same time, I feel like it should not be a crutch. I feel like I've seen people who are in relationships because, you know, they'd rather not be alone. You need to be like a really
Hmm.
strong, secure, okay with yourself. To be able to give yourself fully to another person, because you also have that responsibility, right? You're not like, if you're in a relationship, it works both ways. I mean, you're getting something, you're getting this support and emotion because you are also giving that back, and that's how it is. And that's the beautiful thing about it. So it's important that you are really, really like strong.
Mr. Prateek Kuhad, thank you for all the memories you've created in my head, and also thank you for making my heartbreak first a little more intense and then a lot more healed up. How's it going?
Cheers, man. Good. How are you? Thanks for having me here.
It's crazy having you here, dude. And I feel like every time I speak to you, we kind of have an equation. I don't know whether that's because you've seen a few BeerBiceps videos or whatever, but that's why I'm not going to kind of increase the emotion level of this podcast gradually. I'm gonna dive straight in.
Okay.
uh, Dude, so could you describe like the most painful heartbreak of your life in as much detail as possible? Because I know that that kind of played a role, maybe not in creating Cold Mess directly, but any kind of song that contains any pain, some of those remnants of that pain, of that heartbreak, are present in that song. So what had happened?
I mean, honestly, man, it's not. I don't know if I can say that any one particular heartbreak was the worst or better. And I think the more you kind of grow up and see, different aspects of life and have more diverse experiences, you kind of realize that it's like not that simple. Every
Hmm.
breakup I've had has been different, and they've been harder in different ways, and some have taken longer, some have taken lesser to get over. And you have like, I think everybody has a bad breakup, almost. I mean, almost everybody. And even if it's not a breakup in this traditional sense, it could be a fight, it could be you know, a temporary split between two people, could be between two friends even. It's just, it is actually all the same sentiment to some degree.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's kind of how I feel about it.
Dude, so my mom primarily hates my choice in music because there's a lot of rap, a lot of AC/DC style rock. Okay, but in the lockdown, I spent a lot of time with her. Whatever, getting the house cleaned up, cooking with her, and we'd always end up listening to some Prateek Kuhad music. And I remember the first time I made her listen to it, she's like, "Yeah, see, this is the one kind of song that I like from your entire playlist." And then I made her hear more of your stuff, and that kind of got me wondering that, dude, I feel like you've got this very peculiar element in your music. And I'm not a dude who knows his music very well, but you've got something very different in you. And that's why I also feel that there aren't that many Prateek Kuhads out there. So, do you kind of perceive your music like that? That if there's something different that you're doing, I don't know whether it's more soul in it or you really, really write from the depths of your heart. I don't know what it is, dude. So, you tell me. Like, what do you do that captivates so many people?
I don't know, man. I think like, I mean, if I was to be completely honest, I think that, it's a combination of things. I mean, you write a good song and you really work that song and you play a bunch of live shows and you slowly build a fan base, and it's a whole process, right? I mean, being a professional musician, it's not just about, like, a lot of people have this idea of artists and creators in general, even like such as yourself, that it's, you just make the content piece or whatever you're making. In your case, it's a video. In my case, it's a song. And it just happens. But there's a lot of, stuff that goes behind it, which is everything from,
Hmm.
like, putting yourself out there and distributing it properly, and really, like, I don't know, even making like a good music video with it, or just playing a bunch of shows with it. It slowly builds. So I think there's definitely a bit of that which I have been good with,
Hmm.
and I've like put in a lot of work, which creates that like perception that like that this is such a great song. And if it really is a great song or not, I don't know, but I hope it is. But also it is also a bit of the fact that I do write quite honestly. And I don't know about the depths of my heart, and that's really hard to say, but I definitely like write very subconsciously, in the sense that I don't really have a plan when I'm writing. And a lot of the songs is not something that I decide, okay, today I'm going to write about heartbreak, or today I'm going to write about this aspect of a relationship, or I'm gonna write about friends. I mean, I don't pick a topic and write about it. I usually just write, and then something comes up. And sometimes, and it could be anything. So I think that the because of that process, it just kind of lends a bit of like honesty to the writing that I'm doing, maybe.
You know how they go like, oh, music is what feelings sound like? So the words that you choose to use in your songs and the instruments you choose to use, is that kind of a reflection of how you view relationships? Because if that is the case, dude, there's a reason there's so many people who are crazy about your music from a love perspective. Because I feel for a lot of people, your songs kind of are a very good audio version of the feeling called love. Do you look at it that way at all?
I don't. I mean, I've never thought about it. Like, that's what I'm saying. It's. I mean, a lot of these things is just people who come up with it, and that's how they feel. And I'm really grateful people feel that and so strongly about it. I mean, that's really like one of the best compliments you can get being a songwriter, is that somebody gets, and it still baffles me sometimes, because I feel like I barely have artists who do that to me. I mean, I've definitely had artists and songs which have been such an integral part of my life, but there's so few out of like the thousands of like songs and people you've listened to. So the fact that I am that person to a bunch of people out there is really really cool. uh but yeah, I don't know how it happened, really. I mean, it's just again, I think it's just like it's not intentional that I pick up a certain word, because of it's very instinctive. Like, writing is very instinctive for me,
Hmm.
and it comes from like listening to a bunch of songs and learning a bunch of songs, and like just the years of like the stuff you do to get to a point where you can write and construct a song, and you instinctively kind of get it. It's a skill. So
Yeah.
I put in things which I feel are nice. That's it. I mean, it's like if a word feels nice somewhere, I put it in there. If like the when it comes to the music and the production is the same, it just goes by what feels right for the song.
Crazy. Dude, because you have like some spiritual practices in your life. I know that you have some kind of spiritual base to your thought process. So we recently had Amish Tripathi, the writer, on the podcast, and he spoke about how his art, he strongly considers himself to just be a channel through which the universe expresses its own art. And a lot of artists across different like genres, so be it writing, YouTubing, even I second his thought. Singing also, a lot of people consider their art that they create to not be their own, and they kind of look at themselves as some kind of a channel just for, say, spirituality or art or inspiration to express itself. Do you look at your stuff that way? Like, do you kind of sometimes just consider yourself a channel and you're like, yo, I don't know where this is coming from. It just landed up in my head and I'm just going to throw it out for the world.
For sure. I mean, there's definitely so many things that I've written, and sometimes every now and then you just sit back and you're like, shit, how did I like actually write that song? Because it's hard to like, it's not a very, like I said, and I feel really stupid answering these questions a lot of times, because the kind of question you asked me right before this, which was like, how do you write? I get this a lot, and then I have this idiotic answer, which is like, I just kind of do it. Like, I don't have a process, and I feel like I'm like scamming people almost. But it really is like that. I don't know, and maybe it is that. Maybe it is just like, I mean, I definitely do have a side that believes in spirituality and like energy flows, and it it could be, I don't know. I mean, my mom says that actually sometimes, which is, I feel like you'd expect like an Indian mom to say that, like, just, this is just God's gift and blah blah. And a lot of times she's like, how do you, and I, because it's weird, like my language skills were actually always pretty bad, both in English and in Hindi. I mean, just in terms of just academically, it's not like I was a avid reader, or I've never read that much poetry in my life. I've never like uh you know as a kid especially, I used to hate reading. Literally, my parents would be like, read, like, stop watching TV, like read some books, and I would never do that. And it just suddenly, I was really inspired at a point of my life with some films, some music, and that kind of spurred this like bout of songwriting. And the first time I wrote in Hindi also just kind of happened like that, very spontaneously. And since then it has become a lot more skill based, because once that happened and I felt like encouraged, is when I feel like I actually started working on it consciously. So today I feel like a lot of the stuff I do is uh is kind of planned, in the sense that
Hmm.
I write a song and I construct it with a lot of the skills and the craft that I've developed over the past so many years. Versus, I feel like a lot of my earlier songwriting was very spontaneous. I had no idea what I was doing, but it was just kind of happening, and the writing was happening. And yeah. So I think it's a mix of both. I feel like there are moments you get when definitely it just kind of like flows really nicely, and there's other days which, when sometimes weeks or months pass and you just don't feel like anything's coming naturally, but you still push yourself and you write a song, and sometimes
Hmm.
it's good, so it's just, I don't know.
Dude, considering the fact that we are such a massive population, why aren't there more Prateek Kuhads in India? Like, people who came up independently and like kind of had their own identity. So I remember, for example, and this is a very amateur perspective because I don't understand the music industry well. But back in the 90s, you know how there was this whole wave of Indian pop coming up, like individual people who were making their own kind of music. Lucky Ali had a few like crazy songs back then. And then that just kind of died out in the 2000s where they started doing those remixes of old songs. And
Hmm.
then there was no pop for a while. Now, suddenly with the rise of YouTube, there's like a lot of independent people coming up, releasing their own music. We have a friend called Abhilasha Sinha. I listen to a lot of her stuff as
Hmm.
well. But, you guys like yourself, Abhilasha, and a few other people are the only kind of independent people who have like heard of on social media and all that. So what's going wrong in the system?
Man, this is just completely personally my theory, my opinion to answer your question. Which and I've thought about this before, because we definitely had a wave of independent music in India with in the 90s, like you said, and I'm a massive Lucky Ali fan as well. By the way, I mean, just like all his work from back then. Silk Route was amazing. Euphoria. Some of the stuff is amazing. I mean, there were like some cool like bands back then, but I don't
The
know. It was
Aryans.
the Aryans, yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot about that completely. Bunch of people, man. And I don't know. Maybe it was not sustainable for some reason. I don't know how the back end of that, the business model they were following worked. I feel like they were all. I might be wrong, but I feel like a lot of them were backed by the same producers and music companies, which are part of like the commercial music industry even today. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I just feel like it wasn't, maybe it wasn't truly independent. Whereas I feel like today the shift that has happened, and this is not just happened in India, it's happened across the world, is truly is independent for the first time. I mean, in the sense that like I can sit and write a song today and produce it in my this studio right here and put it out on Spotify like next month, you know, and that's it. And it's as simple as that. I go to a distribution service online and I put it out, and I can do my own marketing. And of course, it's at a much smaller scale, so I might not be able to do a phenomenal job of it, but I can do it. And that was not a reality, and that's everything that basically internet has made possible. So today I feel like a lot of artists are truly independent in the sense that their livelihood is not dependent on anybody but themselves. They are able to like earn uh, their incomes directly through their fans. Do a show and get that, like literally have that direct channel, which truly does make you independent. So I feel like this time it is a lot more sustainable, and this time, and I mean, hopefully that's what actually happens, is truly an independent wave which will continue to be independent.
Hmm. Dude, so considering the position you've kind of created for yourself in your career right now? When you came back from college, when you came back to India, like, did you you studied abroad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you came back to India, did you have these kind of ambitions that, okay, that's the guy I want to be? I want to be once in a while creating some Bollywood music as well. Plus, I want to have a really strong independent presence. Plus, I want to do this. I want to, be the voice of basically the independent scene in India. Now, did you plan all this out? And was there some game you played, like from the career perspective? Or did all of it just happen and you kept working at it?
Yeah. It was definitely like I would say it was like kind of organic in steps, in the sense that like
Hmm.
I definitely didn't know 7 years ago when I pretty much started from scratch in India that I would be here today. And it's not like today was the day I was planning for, but you kind of like plan for the next 1 year or like year and a half and be like, okay, like by next year, if I can. I remember like my one of my first goals when I started doing this was like, and back then, especially the weekenders were a pretty big deal. Like, have you heard of like the music
Yes,
festivals that used to
yes.
happen? And so that was one of my goals, that like I need to play like a really good weekender slot, and then that happened 1 year later. So it was like cool, and then it was like, okay, now what? So then you like plan for something else which is bigger, and you try to challenge yourself more. I feel like that's how it happened for me. It just like, I wasn't even sure that it would be I mean, when I started doing what I do, I kind of gave myself an year, and I was like, let's see how it goes. Because if things had not worked out, I would have probably like stopped doing it and like moved on to something else, because I was fully prepared to
What
do
would you
that.
be doing? What would you be doing,
God knows
man?
what what would I have been doing. I mean, I don't know. I'd probably be like, I don't know. I feel like I would have like eventually got into some form of like entrepreneurship. I would probably like worked somewhere for a bit and then gone done something of my own, because I think that's the kind of person I am. I like being like
Hmm.
not answerable to anybody. So I feel like I would have eventually gravitated towards that, but it could have most likely would have been not music for sure. You know.
I see you applying a lot of your personal branding and entrepreneurship vibes into the brand Prateek Kuhad as well, dude. Like these little things you do on your social media and all. I think that's something you're actively thinking of. And that's also why I want to ask you, dude, like as a 40-year-old, how do you see yourself? Like what would be a good scenario for you? And I'm not talking about just career. I'm talking about you as a person. What do you want?
I don't know, man. I feel like it just, I mean, I feel like in the past, like 10 years almost, I've done so many shifts in what I want. It has changed so often, and that it's really hard to say. I mean, I definitely know that, like, I hope I'm still doing what I'm doing for sure. I mean, I love songwriting, and I hope I'm putting out, like, really great music even 10 years down the line. And other than that, I really don't know, you know?
Okay, so speaking about this thing about I hope I'm creating good enough music. Uh, Again, I'm asking you a rookie question. Why do like certain music directors and all not sustain the levels they once created at? Like, what happens? Does a musician run out of creativity? Does he run out of inspiration? Does he just get like kind of bored of the process? Like, what do you think happens?
Man, I don't know. And that's one of the questions that actually scares me, because I've seen that happen to a lot of like just artists and like of all kinds, actually, not just like musicians, but even like filmmakers
Yeah,
sometimes. And
100%.
you see both kinds. You see some who actually just get better with age, and they just keep like knocking it out, and every time they, and they might have a dip and like make like, I mean, if I'm talking about musicians, there might be like one bad album and then they bounce back with the next one again, and it's just, and nothing is ever that bad. Actually, everything is great. It's just that one is like, maybe their fifth album is not as good as their extremely insane third album. But and then there's other people who definitely feel like something has happened, that they're not putting
Hmm.
enough of themselves in it. Maybe they get bored, maybe they get lazy, maybe it's complacency. It's hard to say. If I had to venture a guess, it would be one of these things. I don't think you run out of creativity. At least I don't like to believe so. I really hope that,
Hmm.
because that's the one thing you can't control. If I run out of creativity, then I'm like, I mean, because everything else, when if it's like laziness or complacency or anything, I can control. I can push myself to be a better person. But if I just run out of creativity for some whack reason, then that's a scary thing. So
Hmm.
I feel like it's just people having different goals. I feel like there's
Hmm.
certain artists who probably reach a certain age and they're like, this is all I want to do. I don't want to do this anymore, so they move on to doing other things. Maybe they're like, you know uh focusing on their personal life more, or like something else, another other interest more. Could be anything, it's hard to say, but I feel like it's a conscious decision more often than not.
Yeah, dude, about creativity, I'm gonna exchange some YouTuber versus musician notes.
Okay.
So I feel there's this whole wave of tension kind of taking over most of the YouTubers and the social media creators in the country, where just people are kind of having the same concerns that you're having, but you're talking about that much older age bracket. You're like, okay, maybe when I'm 35, 40, I hope that I'm all right. A lot of the social media people generally kind of look at that in the context of 1 month. Ki I hope next month I'm able to like sustain like what I'm doing here, because the world of social media helps you rise really fast, but you can also fall
Hmm.
like that fast. So on social media, the hack to sustain creativity is reinvention. That's what we tell everyone. Like all the talents managed by Monkey, all my friends, I'll always tell them that to consciously think of reinvention in some aspect. That could be as simple as using a new camera for your videos or whatever.
Hmm.
But the other thing that I feel isn't spoken about enough is that while I think creativity is one of those things that doesn't voluntarily leave you, there are things you can do in your real life that kind of dull out your creativity. Like just being surrounded by the wrong people, being surrounded by yes men, or just probably even having the wrong habits, not having kind of structure, professionalism in your life. All that also kind of helps your creativity fade away. So I'm sure, dude, if you've been doing this for 7 years, you've spotted like positive patterns for you, things that help your creativity, and probably things that don't, affect your creativity well. And knowing you, I've seen some of the interviews you've done, you stress a lot on your professionalism, like how you kind of do bring that athlete mentality even to what you do in terms of music. You're like, no, dude, if someone's paying me to do this, I'll do a good job. So, what are your positive daily habits which affect your creativity well versus the negative ones?
So, uh, let me first talk about the whole professional thing, which I think I'm not sure if it affects the creativity or not. To be completely honest,
Mm,
that's not the reason I do it. The reason I do it is because I think that's the right thing to do. I mean, if somebody is
mm,
paying me, if I and I'm the kind of person who likes doing things well. So even if I'm like making my coffee, or like cleaning up my room, or cooking something, anything, or writing a song, I want to do it like really really well. So if like things are not happening well, I'll go online and I'll research and be like, okay, how do I make a better coffee, and I'll do that. So I'm constantly trying to do that, and it's a very personal thing. I just like, I get a kick out of it. If I do something
mm.
really really nicely, then I'm like, nice, I feel good about it. So that it's just, yeah, I find it like, just it really motivates me. So that's why I do, why I function like that. When it comes to creativity, man, I got to be honest, I think it's a question I've been trying to figure out myself. Like, it's really weird because, and a lot of the things you said were absolutely on point. I think that like surrounding yourself with the right people is really really important. And for everything though, not just creativity. And being, having healthy habits, or like being consistent with things, all of these things have a role to play. But I don't know, but another, like, and this is a bad example, and I'm not saying everybody should do this all the time, but like, for example, like, I've had really like bad late drunken nights with random people, like six new people, and it's been a very enriching experience. And you could say
Mm,
that that's a really bad thing to do, in the sense that I've definitely like, binge drinking is bad for you, and like maybe like staying, I mean, these are not like it's not something you should do every day, because you're definitely like damaging not just your physical health, but your mental health and your emotional health in the long run. But I've had some very like you know rich experiences through that. I've had rich experiences traveling, but I've also had like really, really rich experiences just being with by myself, just being locked up in a room for like 2 weeks sometimes when I'm, in a new city where I'm trying to like, just like do more work, and or just even in Delhi when I've not had work and I'm just in, you learn new things just by kind of like looking within more sometimes, or just like
Hmm.
reading a really good book, or just like watching like binge watching like 20 movies a day, which I've done sometimes. I find it like this overload of information that like suddenly a week later like spurs some like new thing. So
Yeah.
I feel I'm still trying to like, I think it's one of the hardest question to answer what you've asked, that how do you like keep yourself creative? I mean, if I knew that, I would do that every single day. But I've realized that there's anything could trigger it off. Sometimes just like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, and like a lot of people have this idea about like, for me that a lot of my songs came from a breakup, so I need to stay in that zone all the time. But it's like I'm in a very touchwood, I mean, a really happy relationship right now. But I'm still writing, and I'm writing about other stuff, and we'll find out if it's good or bad or what, in whenever it comes out. But it's not like it's a different thing. But I wouldn't say I'm a better or a worse songwriter for that. So these things have a role to play in your life, but at the same time, it's I don't know, I feel like I've given a really confusing answer to this one because I'm
No,
like
no.
really confused about it myself.
Dude, it's honestly one of those questions that I think about a lot, and probably I've been thinking about for years, that how do you maximize your creativity? How do you make your own systems the most efficient?
It's the golden
And here's
question.
my version. Yeah, here's my version of it, from speaking to entrepreneurs, to singers, to actors, to directors. I feel that everyone has this pool inside them. Like, think of it like just a puddle of creativity that kind of gets a little bit diminished every time you put out some creative work. Like, as in, you're taking some water from that pool and putting it out for the world. Okay. And rest plus absorbing information kind of refills that pool. So when you sleep really well, or when you binge watch 20 movies in a go, that same what you said about inputting information, it adds in like refilling that pool. Now, while meditation doesn't directly affect the quantity of water in your creative pool, what I do feel meditation does is that it allows you like some otherworldly level of focus. So even when your pool is like almost empty, with that little water left inside, in normal circumstances, if you were stressed, you'd be like, no, no, I don't have that much water in my creative pool anymore. But if you have a meditation habit, you're able to exactly take out the amount of water needed from the creative pool and still put it out. So meditation helps you more with your stamina, your endurance. It's like exercise maybe for your mind, but pure creativity is something that is only replenished with time, sleep, and all that. And then obviously, like, all when we talk about spiritual habits like eating cleaner, all that, the speed of water increasing in that pool changes. That's my answer to the question. But again, that's just a hypothesis. So I don't know if it's like, if it's a valid theory. But coming back to what you said.
I mean, yeah, man, I was just saying that, I've never thought about it the way you're thinking about it, but I think it's just another way of basically saying that, like, if you are, and the, I mean, meditation is like a way for you and even for me to a certain degree to stay really focused and on top of my, like, just like centered so I can function better as a human. And I think it's just like, you're just basically talking about discipline. The harder you work on your craft, the better you'll be. So even if you have like that really tiny amount of water left inside you, like you said, you can still make something out of it if you really are
Hmm.
centered overall. And how you stay centered is how different people do it different ways. I used to find running really centering at a point of time. I feel like just staying fit helps me keep a little balanced, eating right, like, so everybody has their own ways of doing that. But for sure, man, like, I think there is no, and this is something that I actually feel like is really important. And it's like, it's a perspective that I found very useful for me, that even if I have even if I have this inner reservoir of this puddle inside me full completely, like you said, and if I don't have the requisite skills to convert that into, you know something that is like good, like, in my case a song, a song, if I don't know how to like write a song at all, then it doesn't matter how much creativity I have, it's never going
Mm.
to get converted. But even if I have very little of that creativity left, if I have uh you know put in the work and I am a good songwriter, I can still write a pretty decent song with nothing in it at all. So it's like, and when you have both, that's when like the magic happens, and that will not always happen to you because that's not something you can control. But what you can control is like the discipline behind it. So I
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
like all you can do is do that. If you just focus on that and not worry about that inner reservoir too much, then like you'll be fine, I think.
Yeah. Also, the key word you put out is centering. So in spiritual practice, it's called grounding. It's the same concept as
Hmm.
centering. So grounding is basically something that prevents you from overthinking. So how familiar are you with chakras? Like, have you heard of like
Yeah.
just how chakras work? So grounding, again, without getting into too many details about chakras, grounding is something related to your lowest chakra. And the curse of being an extremely creative person is that your lowest chakra is always shaken up. So one way to fix it is, again, living a clean life, all those like spiritual practices we speak of. But there are specific meditations which kind of help ground you much more. And when you have the grounding, I'm guessing, like, that increases your focus, your discipline levels, and therefore you're able to pull out things from that pool. Which is also why you'll see like really talented creative professionals not really kill it in their career. Even though they have all the skills, in the playbook, they can't really convert that into something because they lack that certain amount of grounding. And this is also what I see wrong with a lot of young college kids, especially many of them who are taking up music, fantastic musicians, but just lack that little edge in terms of grounding. They either overthink, they draw out a lot of negative scenarios. A lot of them, I mean, while I understand that you can get away with having a not so on point lifestyle, I feel if you're trying to get somewhere in life and things aren't working out for you for a while, you need to kind of question the patterns you're living out in your daily life, dude. And I'm only
Correct.
saying that because that's what happened with me. Like, I didn't reach where I wanted to in my first 2 years of doing YouTube, and I changed up things in me, which eventually led to a kya bolte hai, like catapulted me into like a newer dimension. So, would you say that there's been some kind of a switch at any point? I'm not talking about just your daily habits, but in terms of, was there anything you did differently that just like elevated you? Like maybe one instance or one thought process change?
I always want to be a better person the next day. I mean,
Hmm.
I uh, and I think it comes from like I think a very interesting that thing that you said right now, which is very true, and which I see in a lot of people is that I mean, to kind of fundamentally really break it down to simple terms, I think a lot of people have a very strong victim complex. Like a lot of people consider themselves victims constantly, and that I think is a big barrier to
Hmm.
because then you don't blame yourself for anything, and you just blame the surroundings for everything. So if you're not doing well, if things are not going your way, instead of trying to like introspect within and see that, okay, what are the things that I might have done wrong, you're constantly putting the blame on either people around you or circumstances around you. And I used to have that, basically the kind of like and I still do. I think everybody does. We have days when we really feel like the world is against us, and you're just like really negative and you're blaming everything around you as the source of all your problems. But what I realized, and this is something actually like my sister and my brother-in-law, who are I'm very close to them, and uh, this is something that like they brought to my notice like some years ago, and not particularly towards me, but just as a very like overlooked human trait, that like we all tend to be the protagonists of our own story. And you know
Hmm.
a lot of times we consider that protagonist to be the kind of victim of all the world's problems, and it's not always the case. And of course there are times when the world will actually be against you, but the thing is that what I realized was there's no point thinking about that, because I can't change the world.
Hmm.
I can't actually beyond a point change the larger circumstances and things around me. all I can do is like learn to fight back and become a better person. So that's like, you gotta focus on that. And it still happens to me. I still have days when I just feel like shit about myself and I feel like everything is so unfair. But then you like have to like kind of pull yourself out of the hole and be like, okay, what can I do to fix this, you know? So I think
Mm.
that's a very important thing you said, for sure. And I think that is a big reason why a lot of people, you know, uh, don't end up getting where they want to, because it becomes a
Mm.
vicious cycle. The more you think that you're the victim, you actually do end up becoming, you know, one.
100%, dude. Do you feel that your spiritual practices have kind of helped heal these wounds from the past? Because I certainly feel that, dude. Again, you said how you're a perfectionist about making your coffee, also. I think that to be a good creative professional, somewhere you got to have that perfectionist element in you. And the curse of that is self doubt. The curse of that
Yeah.
is a lot of, for lack of a better word, self mutilation, where you're just like, I hate me, dude. Why am I not doing this well, or whatever? So do you feel that somewhere spirituality has like fixed that for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think, man, to me, like, spirituality is also just, I mean, it boils down to certain practices, right? And it's again, it's very personal. Like for me, at a point of my life, running really worked really, really well. And that point, I didn't really know what any of these, like any of, and I've been introduced to concepts of spirituality more in the past couple of years. I started doing yoga a couple of years ago for the first time properly, and actually last year for the first time properly. And a lot of the things that I was really kind of completely against, like astrology, for example, or like just things that people, consider as part of like spirituality, i I've become more open minded towards them, because it has helped me to a certain degree. But that's only recently. Like for a earlier it was something else, like I used to like run a lot. I used to run like 10 kilometers like 5 times a week for months, and that really helped me, like, you know just feel really settled. That 1 hour of running every day was kind of like meditative for me, and I felt like I used to come
Mm.
back and just like feel less anxious, and less critical of myself, and a little like tired, but in a good way, and more productive the next day. So that was one way of doing it. I think everybody has to find their own personal ways for doing it, but for sure, like, I mean, it boils down to like doing things that definitely like make you feel better about yourself. It sounds really simple, that you just do something that makes you feel good, but it's actually not, because uh I don't know, to discover that thing that works for you, that you can put into practice on a consistent basis, that you can stick to, and that truly does good things to you. Because a lot of times, like, what you define as good in the moment might not be good for you in the long term. So,
Dude, like, again, while I have been advising people that they should find happiness first within themselves and stability first within themselves and then go out chasing relationships, I feel like the correct romantic relationships also add a certain level of stability and balance to people's lives. So, dude, again, considering the fact that you're in a stable relationship right now, how much of a role does that play in your professional life? Like to just balance shit out, to kind of, tell you that you're not actually as bad as you think you are, or to just to just calm down your head. Does that play any kind of role?
yeah, yeah, of course, man. And I think, like, not just me, for anybody, whether you have
Mm,
professional goals or not, and it's just uh, a stable relationship just makes you happier. I think. I mean, from what
mm,
I've seen, and I've been in a couple in my lifetime, and like, it's definitely a phase which is has a lot of like personal comfort, and there's a lot of like positive reinforcement from the other side, which, like you said, makes you
mm.
feel better about yourself. So a lot of the toxic ways you could be looking for validation from the outside world gets replaced by a more healthier form of validation from your partner.
Can you explain this? Like, this is a very cool thing you said, but I just want you to break it down a little more. This toxic versus
it's
positive.
it's like, man, I think almost everybody out there is a bit insecure. We're all insecure,
Hmm.
actually. We all
Hmm.
have certain insecurities in different aspects. And I think that like we're all, and because of that we're seeking validation, and and there's so many forms of seeking validation. And it could be like just a night out with your friends and getting really drunk, or like excessive use of social media, or in today's world, or just indulging in activities that feel like uh, give you joy in the moment but actually are not healthy in the long term. I mean, there's so many examples, right? Versus like I think and we need that actually to a certain degree. And uh, I think if you have the right partner, it just they will not like you will not need those toxic forms of validation anymore. You'll get a much healthier
Hmm.
form, because that's the point, right? I mean, of family and friends and loved ones around you. One of the points at least is to like uh, somebody there telling you that like, look, you are a really good person, like you don't be hard on yourself. And I do that for my friends and my family sometimes, and like they do that for back for me sometimes. When I have my low moment, when I have a low moment and I'm being really self-hateful, like my girlfriend will tell me that like, dude, chill out. Like things are
Hmm.
not that bad, and she'll show me the right side, and she'll me like you know why I am a good person, and that gives me perspective. So I think it's a really like it's another like another way of kind of like really centering and grounding yourself. I feel like it just makes you like uh it takes off all those other pressures, so you can focus on what really matters, which in my case is like writing a really good song, so I can actually like focus on that and do that. So
Yeah. Dude, good and bad are subjective words. Like when you say that something's good, it's in your head, you've already compared it to probably a so called bad moment from your past or, from your reference points. So, dude, like, why do you say that your current relationship is good? Like, what constitutes a happy, positive relationship in the now, other than what you just said about, that person fills up that one insecurity void or whatever you want to call it? What else like constitutes a positive, happy relationship?
yeah, and definitely that's just one of the things. Again, man, really personal question in the sense that like hard to answer. Like I think it's a personal choice. It differs from person to person. Uh, I think you need to kind of look. There's not a simple answer for this. You need to kind of look within yourself to know what you want. From your partner. I think for me, it's definitely the. I mean, there's one aspect which is just kind of like instinctive, where you feel comfortable with the other person, you kind of trust them instinctively. That's really really important. If I can't trust the other person, then I cannot like be in a serious relationship with somebody I can't trust. Like, and that is like
Hmm.
a straight up like, because, and I feel like that's probably like for everybody. I mean, obviously that's such an important thing. And I think like somebody who kind of helps you grow, who you see yourself like growing with, and who pushes, and that I think is a personal thing. Like I'm the kind of person like who wants to be a better person tomorrow in every way,
Hmm.
and I want to be with somebody who pushes that versus like, and that has nothing to do with the other person being a good person or a bad person. It's just like I think it's how like your energies interact, and how you like kind of like the dynamic between the two people. Some people who are just like symbiotic like this, like they really push each other in a healthy way in the right direction. And I would hope to be in a relationship of that
Yeah.
sort. I think that's the ideal thing.
Yeah. Dude, why do you think divorces happen like in general? Like my theory is that people grow into different versions of themselves as they grow older. And also it's this whole thing about I think when you live with someone, it kind of changes the dynamic, dude. It's like especially for guys, that's why the concept of a man cave exists in the first place, where guys just want to be isolated. And I've seen some of the most successful marriages around me have an element of a man cave within the house. And I'm not just saying man cave, like I mean both the partners can kind of spend time in their own little zones away from themselves. I think that's the reason divorces are happening nowadays, dude. What do you think?
I mean, I don't know about nowadays, man. I think like uh I think for a long time divorces, and this is, I mean, this is a bit of a, this is again, it's like my theory. I think for a long time divorces didn't happen in India because of just like
Hmm.
sexism. I mean, it's just, I think
Yeah.
like the women of like our mothers' generations and before took like the brunt of the issues, and it was such a big
Hmm.
social taboo for a divorce to happen that it just never happened. Today, I
Hmm.
think like it's in a way a good sign, because like it just means that women are I mean, they're not as empowered, unfortunately, but they are definitely more empowered than they used to be, which is like a really
Hmm.
good sign. It's a good thing that like society is moving forward, where like both partners of either sex have like a voice, which is important, which
Hmm.
is why there is also like more conflict, I think.
Yeah.
That's kind of like one answer. The other thing also, which is just like purely from the perspective of like why a relationship breaks. I mean, a divorce is just like basically two people falling apart. And I think uh, one thing that you said is definitely a reason. I think sometimes there are couples who don't give each other enough space, and that
Hmm.
just comes from a place of lack of communication. I feel like a lot of times people don't actually express themselves. Like if you know the a guy wants to have 1 hour alone, or like another person, like I whatever, the guy or the girl, like one person wants 2 hours alone every day, they might be scared to say it, saying thinking that like the other person will get offended. And I feel like sometimes that goes on for ages, and like
Hmm.
ultimately you just end up having this massive like blowout, because you have this repressed feeling of just needing some space from day to day. So and it's there's nothing wrong with it, like I mean, I think we need space, we need to have our own time as well. And I think a successful relationship, a lot of times, you like you said, will have that aspect where it's carved out, where it's like we are here for each other and we love each other and we are each other's rocks. But at the same time, like I need to have 2 hours where I'm just like alone, like listening to music or watching this movie or whatever. And that's fine.
Yeah.
And it's a very personal thing. Some people might like it, some people might not, but you should be able to express it and get it out of the way instead of repressing it.
So, dude, you spoke about trust right now. Okay. And again, that's also a subjective term. I'm sure that at some point in your past, you had your trust broken, or, that's what's resulted in you saying that right now. Same here. That's happened with me as well. Uh, gonna put it out there. Like, I've been cheated on like more than once by like people, who I invested a lot of time, energy, and all in. Um, Now, in saying that, I feel every human is born with certain intrinsic goals. So you have like career goals or whatever that you kind of build as you grow up. You're like, okay, that's who I want to be. But then somewhere in your heart, you have like these kind of goals for your life that have always been there. And I feel like I've genuinely always had this goal of having a really good, stable relationship, like call it a marriage, call it a long term thing. And that's why I asked the question about why do these divorces happen? Why do breakups happen? Like what goes wrong? Which is also why people gravitate towards rom-coms and Prateek Kuhad songs, because there's a lot of purity in that kind of music. Like that's what love sounds like to a lot of people. Like for example, Dil Beparwa talks about that, dude. Like like the lyrics, the whole feel of the song is the same concept that yo, even if I've been mistreated or if I've had my trust broken, I'm still gonna go for it again. So again, that's coming from that intrinsic goal, and that same intrinsic goal of a stable relationship exists for a lot of Indians. I don't know whether it's a part of a culture and we are extremely romantic people or what it is. But man, do you think about this? Do you think about your long term future? Do you think about like fucking fatherhood and shit? Like because that's something I've been like thinking about a lot. For some random reason, I'm like, yo, I'm this like weightlifting dude who thinks about protein shakes. Where are these fatherhood thoughts coming from? But they're coming up from some deep place within my soul, dude. So how about you?
I don't know, man. I feel like I can barely, take care of myself properly. I am definitely not ready for fatherhood. It definitely like scares me. Like I'm not there for sure. And I'm quite like fluid, man, in the sense about like this question about long-term relationships. I think that like, and I struggle with this, like, this thought that there's definitely a lot of comfort. There's so much comfort in a relationship, I mean, just having
Hmm.
this steady person who looks out for you and you love and you want them around all the time. It's a beautiful thing, like, and I love being in that space. But at the same time, I feel like it should not be a crutch, it should not like there's a and thankfully I don't think I'm in that situation. But like I feel like I've seen people who are in relationships because you know they'd rather not be alone.
Out of habit?
uh Yeah. Sometimes it's out of habit. Sometimes people who've just always like dated people from an early age, so they just are so petrified of being alone that they will just date anybody, and then they make a lot of compromises and end up with really bad people sometimes. And I'm a little like, like conscious of that. So a lot of times worried that I hope I'm not doing that. And I
Hmm.
think that's an important thing, because I think you need to be, and it kind of goes back to something that you said a little while ago, right? That you need to be strong yourself before kind of, and maybe this is the wrong word to use, but before kind of like deserving somebody else. You need to be like a really
Hmm.
strong, secure, okay with yourself, to be able to give yourself fully to another person, because you also have that responsibility, right? You're not like, if you're in a relationship, it works both ways. I mean, you're getting something, you're getting this support and emotion because you are also giving that back, and that's how it is. And that's the beautiful thing about it. So it's important that you are really, really like strong.
Hmm.
And that's the only like question I think about, which is why I said that like it's kind of like fluid for me, that like I don't want to be in a place where I want to be scared about not being in a long-term relationship, because I want to feel like, confident enough about myself, in the sense that I can like handle any situation myself. So I'm with somebody because that just propels me even further, and it makes my life better and theirs better, but not out of weakness, out of like a choice to like, exceed my own expectations in a way, or like, be an even better person.
Yeah, dude, I'm trying to honestly decode these difficult questions through the podcast, honestly. So, if I feel like a guest does give a certain subject a lot of thought time, I'll always ask that guest about that subject. And that's exactly why I wanted to ask you about relationships. But the other kind of domain in Prateek Kuhad, which I feel isn't explored a lot by audiences, is this depth of thought thing, dude. Like I knew you were a deep guy just because of the lyrics and all that, but I feel it doesn't just apply to your sense of love. I feel you create love songs because somewhere that's also the businessman in you, where you're like, I know that this will like do well. Okay, and there's nothing wrong in it, dude. Like I know I make good fitness videos, that's why I continue making physical fitness videos, though I talk a lot more about Ayurveda if I could.
Hmm.
Anyway, coming back to the point, I feel there's a key question I want to ask you, dude. Because you're in like a really good high point in your career. Like, like a lot of people have been listening to your music in the lockdown. I'm dead sure you've seen a lot of growth. I actually attended one of your live concerts on Instagram, and people were just losing their shit. People were like, oh, sing this, sing that. I was like, dude, this guy's in a good kind of career zone. Now, the question is that I feel there's four things primarily that reveal the character of a person. So one is like extremely deep questions, which is what we try doing on the Ranveer show. The second is some kind of trauma. For example, even this coronavirus situation could be considered as a form of trauma for a lot of people, even if they're not affected by it. Just that there's this infectious disease out there. Oh my God, I'm either really scared or really brave or really positive or really negative. The third would be long-term relationships. That's something that reveals your character. Okay, how do you react when you're stuck with that same person for like 10 years? And the fourth one, which is what I want to talk to you about, is power, which could be considered money slash fame. But I feel fame reveals it even more than money. So, dude, like, how has like fame changed your life? Like, what do you see like changing about your thought process and all that?
I still honestly, and I'm going to be really honest here, like I don't feel that famous. And I've
Okay.
said this a few times before, and I've got like criticism from people around me, like, I'm trying to be like, I don't know, cocky or like, and but it's really is
Hmm.
like that. And I don't know if it's because maybe this is not enough for me. Maybe I am like kind of immune to it and I don't think about it as much. I'm not really sure why, but it goes up and down. Actually the real thing is
Hmm.
not like I don't feel famous, but it goes up and down. There are points in your life where you do feel like that, and then it's followed up with like really humbling experiences. So that's how I have seen,
Hmm.
which invariably ends up kind of like, putting me back into how I was anyway, and I get back to focusing on, you know doing what I do, which is like writing a song. uh
Hmm.
so that's one thing. I mean, and an example of that, to explain that, is like, if I go on tour and I play a show to 6,000 people and everybody's going nuts, then like, you feel very famous right when you get off stage. You feel
Mm.
like top of the world. You feel like shit, holy crap. And then, like, maybe 2 weeks later, you're like just at home, and it's just a quiet day, and maybe it's Friday night and all your friends are busy, and you know you're just like bored and alone, and you're like shit, like what the heck, then you feel like shit. So it's like that has happened to me, so you have days when, and then in those days I don't feel famous, I just feel like, so it's a very like it's a confusing thing. I mean, it definitely throws you off. How it's affected my like thought process is really hard to say, man. Again, I don't think I'm like aware enough to answer that question. I'm sure I have changed. It's everybody changes anyway, every year. So it's unlikely that in the past 5 years from where I was to where I'm at today, I have not changed. How I've changed is really hard to say.
Okay, coming to the third point of the question, or the second point, I don't remember which one it was. Second point. What has the coronavirus lockdown done for you as a creative professional? What's it changed in you? Or as a human being? The creative professional part. Just as a person, what's it changed?
One, it's been almost like a forced holiday, actually.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think in a good way, in the sense that it's actually centered me a lot. I've put in a lot of like consistent like practices that I used to follow in the early part of my career, which is just like being healthy and eating healthy and sleeping well. Uh, a big factor of that is also because I started, uh, like last year, I, started dating who I'm dating right now, my girlfriend. And like that has also helped a lot in like all of this. And we've both helped stabilize kind of each other, but also because of the lockdown, because it's kind of forced me to like slow down and just stop, you know, traveling like a crazy person and like just being constantly overwhelmed by things that are happening. And I am like that, I respond to stimuli. So like if 20 things are happening around me work wise, I want to do all of them, and I want to make sure all of them happen on time and all of them happen really well. So
Hmm.
stuff just stopped happening, for the first 2 months especially. It was all dead, like, nobody was working and there was no expectation, so that kind of like forced me to slow down, which is good and in a way. And I just hope it doesn't continue like this, because then I'll just never do shit with my life. But you know hopefully, like, it's one of those things that's like kind of just gotten me ready for the next phase of my life. I feel like,
Hmm.
when things get busy again, I'll be physically, mentally and emotionally in a better space to be able to deal with those challenges. So
Yeah.
I hope, I feel like, I mean, and the optimistic side of me wants to believe that like that's what the lockdown has done for me.
Yeah. Dude, honestly, I was having this weird kind of feeling for the last 2 weeks. I discussed it with my co-founder as well. Now, while I was a young entrepreneur, like a younger entrepreneur, like I was like between 22 and 25, I'd kind of look at people who had these theories on nihilism and existential crisis moments, and just say that I just feel that maybe you don't have a solid goal you're working towards. And that was like my kind of escape, that okay, I want to build these companies and I want to build these YouTube channels or whatever. As I'm growing up, and as that, you know, great, money's increasing, fame's increasing, numbers are increasing. Okay. At the same time, I'm giving more and more of myself to my work, more and more of my emotions to the art we're creating as time is passing by. And recently in the lockdown, while it's been amazing for me, I've discovered a lot of things about myself, picked up new skills, meditated a lot more. I do have these questions about why am I doing this job? What am I working towards? What's the meaning of all this? Like, why do people consciously take up entrepreneurship or being a YouTuber if it's this intense? When, if I go to a beach and I meet a guy who sells coconuts there, and he seems like the happiest guy in the world. If everything that we work for is centered around the concept of happiness, why as an entrepreneur slash YouTuber do you have to go so hard in the paint? And my answer to that has just been the start of this podcast, where we spoke about you yourself being a channel for art. And even entrepreneurship is art in a lot of ways, dude. You have to think of business strategies, you have to create things. I just feel that, okay, if God or the universe has selected me as that guy, I have to just serve my purpose as a channel for growth of other people, growth of like this art to happen. Which is my question to you, dude. What's your answer to that question? Why does Prateek Kuhad exist in this world? What are you working
I
towards?
don't know, man. Again, this is like, It's a golden question. I mean, and I've had this like doubt in my head like all the time, like every now and then. It's just, it's definitely happened to me in the lockdown after a while, because I feel like the past year and a half was so busy that things just went in a blur. And then when I slowed down, I
Yeah.
was like, and you have so much time to think that your brain goes to all kinds of places. And then you're like, man, do I want to keep doing this? Like, I mean, the other day I was talking to my girlfriend. I'm like, man, let's seriously just like go to, and she's a doctor, so she can like, work anywhere, in the sense she can go and like she'll find a job in a hospital anywhere. So I'm like, let's just move to the hills and like get a place and like grow some vegetables and just that's it. Let's do that for 2 years. And I seriously considered it that one day. I was like, let me just like, chill out for a little bit. That's like I mean, it's a question of that people have asked for like millions of years, right? Like, why do we exist? Why do we do what we do? I don't know if it's the and actually, the way I like to think of it is that, to me, almost like the goal of my life is not happiness. A lot of people feel like that, and for a lot of people, the ultimate goal is like to be a happy person. And I don't think it's that simple, because from what I've always seen, I feel like happiness is a really fleeting feeling. Sometimes it's like really good for a day, and you feel it in moments. It's not that simple. I don't know what motivates us, but like it's kind of like a gut thing, and I go with it because it's kind of like a gut thing. It just feels like this is the direction I need to go in. And that's where like I don't have an answer. And one possible answer is what you said, that like we're all just like meant to be a vessel, and like we're meant to be do certain things because we are meant to do that, and we are meant to help people or whatever. It's all supposed to happen. And that I'm not quite, I don't know. I mean, I don't that makes me feel a bit odd, because I feel like I'm kind of powerless and this is just kind of happening. And I don't like that, because I also like to feel responsible for my actions. I feel like, everything that has happened for me and around me is because also I really pushed towards it, and like I worked hard for it. So there's a part of me that, wants to believe that, but there's also a part of me which feels like, so many of those things would have never happened. I mean, just purely by my hard work. There was definitely like I'm definitely had like luck or whatever you want to call it on this. A lot of things happened by chance. A lot of things happened because they just kind of happened, and it's whack, and I have no explanation for it. So it's I don't know. I don't know how to answer this question in that sense. If that makes sense.
No, I completely hear you, man, and which is also why I've started thinking so much more about both romantic and family relationships, because I feel that that also fills that void a little bit. We are like, maybe my purpose is to be there for this particular soul or these particular souls. That could be a part of the purpose. But when I study this question from a spiritual perspective and take a deep dive into these heavy spiritual books, the answers I get there are slightly different, where they talk about having your career and life purpose and then also spiritual purpose. And usually when your job is creative, and again that could even be business where you are creating something for the world, you do achieve your spiritual purpose partly through your job. So dude, for example, just cold mess, again, like I'm giving you my own example. I was going through like a really tough situation in my love life, and that song, while it hurt me a lot, it did leave me slightly more healed. Sometimes, like, just to kind of make sense with pain, you'll try hurting yourself more just to feel it completely, and then you'll be like, cool. Cold mess has been that for a lot of people, and maybe that was your purpose, dude. Like, this art that came out through you kind of is helping a lot of people out there. So, what's your last like kind of life learning, dude, from all this? Because you're a super deep guy. So what's like your last bit of, I don't want to call it advice, but what's your last vibe you want to leave the world with?
I don't know, man. I mean, it's just like all the questions you've asked me, that like I'm just giving you like answers of, like personal answers. I'm just being like how I think about those things, and it's just yeah, I don't know. I don't think of myself as like a deep person or anything. It's just it's weird, right? Like, I mean, things just happen, and then you just kind of like go with it, I guess. A lot of it is just that. I don't know how else to say it. Sounds really like silly, but it you I feel like I just go with things actually to say, beyond a certain point, like however much planning there is, and I react to things mostly in the sense like, okay, today this has happened, let's do this.
Yeah. But also, I feel you have a strong sense of discipline, planning, professionalism, perfectionism, if you want to call it that. So while I think that's your modesty speaking up, dude, you don't acknowledge yourself for that. Which also brings me to my absolute final question. How can a young kid become the next Prateek Kuhad? Like, how do you become the next Prateek Kuhad, dude? Other than the professionalism and perfectionism factor.
You should do what you want to, and everybody has a different path. Everybody has a different like
Hmm.
way of getting where they do, and that's the key actually. I think it's like you have to really, you should probe within as much as you can and get to know yourself really well, so that you can make the right decisions for yourself. And getting other people's advice and following examples is a great thing. I've done that myself. I've read like people's biographies who I've respected and what they've done. But I've never like aped anything, in the sense like I've never just like done something and applied it to my life just because it worked for somebody else, but I've applied it if I feel like it works for me. So it's like, like you read
Hmm.
stories of 10 people and you feel like, that's one habit that's great, that's another habit that's great, that's another one. And out of those like 10 habits you read about, you only apply two to yourself, maybe because that's what's applicable for you in your context and your life,
Hmm.
and what your needs and your desires and your strengths and your weaknesses. And it's really important to be self-aware, I think, because only when
Hmm.
you're self-aware can you make the right decision for yourself. And you need to just be a bit gutsy, because the other problem is
Hmm.
that even if you are self-aware, a lot of people are too driven by what other people say and what other people push them to do. And the kind of world we live in, like, we will always have people around us who will push us in directions, whether it's like friends or family or like your teachers or society or what you read or propaganda, whatever the heck, so it's like at some level, again, you take all of that as feedback and information, but it's really important to like look deep within and be absolutely sure that you're doing what you want to do and not what like somebody else wants you to do.
100%. Do you have any last tips on how one can become more self-aware?
I think it's like a practice you get do in the sense it's a process. You get better at it the more you do of it. To become more self-aware, you first of all have to, I guess, acknowledge the fact that you might not be self-aware, because a lot of times people don't change because they don't think they need to. So I'm still all the time questioning myself, even till today, that like, you know what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, is it coming from the right place or not, and am I getting influenced
Hmm.
by the right people, am I in the right surroundings? You're always questioning,
Hmm.
and it's laborious. A lot of people don't do it because it's hard. I mean, you don't want to like get up
Hmm.
every day with a doubt in your head, because it's like it sucks. You want to just feel like good about things and everything's great, but the moment you ask those hard questions, it causes some turmoil within. But it's important to like let that turmoil happen, and only then can you actually like reach the kind of like the crux of the problem. And or actually, so I think it self-awareness is just kind of like comes from self-awareness, I guess. It's a bit of a weird, you know what I'm saying, like it has to be built. You build stamina for self-awareness.
I mean, this just popped in my head after you answered the question. I feel that you do become self-aware through questioning other people about the shit that's going on in your head, dude. For
Hmm.
example, this podcast was a version of how I became more self-aware by asking you my existentialism questions.
And
But
so did I actually.
yeah, so I just guess that questioning and asking like the questions you're embarrassed to ask or the questions you think are stupid enough, but other people are thinking about those things as well.
Hmm. For sure.
And the other harder path is obviously observing your own mind through things like vipassana and
Yeah.
meditation and all that. All that definitely helps, dude, because you're basically closing your eyes and senses, and all those senses are turning inwards and like staring at your own thoughts. A lot of people don't meditate because they're like, yo, I see too much negativity in my meditation. Arey, all that's the negativity that you're confronting and that's leaving you.
This is
So
important.
I
Yeah.
guess that's my answer. But Mr. Pratik Kuhad, thank you, brother. This was a lot of fun, dude. I didn't
Yeah, same
expect
here,
it to
man.
go down these roads. I was gonna ask you a lot more about music, but I'm glad we did this.
Yeah, for sure, it was really fun.
So Guys, I'm going to be linking all of Pratik's handles, channels, everything down below. Make sure you check out a lot of his music. Heal yourselves and enjoy the love that is expressing itself through this man. Pratik, thank you for being here, bro.